It's been reported that Columbus Blue Jackets young center Pierre Luc Dubois has requested a trade to look at change of scenery. Today we're going to be discussing an article that suggests the Montreal Canadiens should make a push to bring the French Canadian center home to Montreal. We'll discuss the trade proposal and if you should do it coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're taking a look at an article from TVA Sports, looking at a trade proposal, looking at the Montreal Canadiens' possibility of going after young French Canadian center iceman Pierre Luc Dubois. Of course, we've talked about here a few times now in the past 3 or 4 days, ever since it's been reported that he's been looking for a fresh start or a change of scenery. Of course, he did sign a fresh 2-year contract valued at an average annual value of $5 million just the other day. Obviously, that's a backloaded contract, so this year he'll make 3.5. Next year he'll make 6.5, which gets him a higher qualifying offer for his next contract. So obviously, Pierre-Luc Dubois is a budding star in the NHL. As we know, he's been gradually getting better all the time. Last year in the playoffs, especially during the 2020 NHL return to play, it was a bit of a coming out party where he got a little bit more exposure on a bigger stage, especially where they played, one of the bigger markets in the Toronto Maple Leafs. And a lot of people who might not have been as familiar with him realized just how good he was. He's been the number one center iceman for the Jackets for some time, and he's really coming into his own here. Now, of course, the 22-year-old center was the former number 3 overall pick in the 2016 NHL draft, and at that point in time, it was a little bit of a surprise number 3 pick. Many felt that Kekalainen and the Jackets kind of went off the board, if you will, and selected him, who many had ranked just, not substantially lower, but a bit lower nonetheless, which kind of shook things up there. And actually there were some trade discussions going on as well among some of the teams ranked in yours from like 3 down to like 6, 7, 8 that were not happening now because of the order of players that were kind of thrown off by the Jackets making that selection. But looking back now, I think the Jackets were pretty smart in their selection. Of course, many felt they would likely take Jesse Puljujarvi, who at this point in his career is yet to become an established NHL player. So right now that selection looks really, really good. It looks like they got themselves a number 1 center who can continue to evolve and continue to get better as time goes on. He's only 22. He has not hit his prime yet, but this sounds like that he would like a fresh start somewhere else. Now, looking at the article a little bit further and the rationale behind it, it sounds like perhaps that after a number of years now playing under coach John Tortorella, that maybe that relationship might be part of the reason why that he wants a fresh start. I mean, as we know, Tortorella is a very successful coach in the NHL. Has been around a long time, but he can be difficult to play for, and for some guys, it just does not work. We've seen numerous situations of them kind of bickering on the bench, and Tortorella being really hard on him. Obviously, he feels he can get more out of him and help him reach another gear, which is all he's trying to do. But it can still be difficult to manage, and as the player, I wonder if that might be part of the scenario here that's unfolding. That might be a reason why he wants a fresh start somewhere else. At this point, there's really no reason to think Tortorella will be, replaced with the Jackets head coaching job anytime soon. He's done a pretty overall good job, and at this point, they've had decent amount of success making the playoffs, etc. So we don't have any reason to believe that his job is in jeopardy right now. So we'll see what happens as this story evolves. I know many people thought that after he signed a 2-year contract that he's going to be a Jacket and he's not going anywhere. And that might be the case on a short-term basis. But if the fact is that he made a trade request and he still would prefer a trade, it's something that they may have to come to do sooner or later. Like I mentioned in another video, we've seen the Jackets play hardball with other RFAs and end up trading them. Prime examples are Ryan Johansson and Josh Anderson, who was just dealt this past summer again to the Montreal Canadiens, the team we're talking about here today. So as this article suggests, the Montreal Canadiens should go after the budding French center iceman to see if there's a fit there for a trade. Now, the trade proposal suggests the Habs trade center iceman Phillip Danault and top prospect Danault Caufield. Now, of course, in the case of Phillip Danault, his future with the Habs is a little bit uncertain right now. He's coming up on an expiring contract, and it is going to be difficult from a salary cap perspective to keep him depending on what he wants for a new deal. And at the same time, you do have some other top young center talent like a Nick Suzuki or a Kakaniemi who they want to give more opportunity to. So, it's debatable whether or not Phillip Danault returns and signs a new deal or not. But either way, it's an unfortunate situation, really, in a sense, because Danault has really become one of the top two-way centers and is really a prime player right now for the next few years who could be an awesome number 2, number 3 guy for Montreal. But we'll see what he wants to do too. But obviously, including him in this kind of package trade would make sense because of the uncertainty over his future, and you know that the Jackets are going to want some help from a youngster coming back as well. It's going to have to be a top young player, so maybe they want more of a package, including some other prospects. But right now, Danault Caufield is the guy suggested here. Now, I'm not going to say that they're suggesting this because of the lack of lighting it up, we'll say, at the World Juniors. I think he overall hasn't had a terrible tournament, but I think many people have suspected he would be scoring more goals and putting up more highlight reel plays, which is really not happening. But the tournament's also not over. Team USA still is in the tournament here, playing in the quarterfinals as I record this video. They'll be playing later on this evening, so we'll see what he does tonight, and we'll see what he does going forward here before this tournament's out. I suspect the U.S. has an excellent chance to win and move on to the semifinals, maybe even go for gold. So we'll see how that progresses and how things go for Caufield there. Maybe he'll have some better games here and finish out the tournament strong. His play in college hockey so far has been pretty decent as well. I'm not sure that Caufield's really in a situation where he's kind of blowing everybody away, but he's certainly not been bad either. And I think we kind of knew that even though he really lit it up along with Jack Hughes leading into the 2019 draft, that he was going to need some time to develop. He still has a high projection to be a top goal-scoring winger at the NHL level, but it is going to take some time to get him ready to be able to accomplish that. So would you want to consider trading that for a guy like Dubois? So ultimately, your center position would change drastically. You'd go from having, like I said, from Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, and Danault to guys like Dubois, Suzuki, Kotkaniemi. Now, at this point, with your other younger centers, I think Nick Suzuki is a solid top 6 center iceman. Even last year, he had the opportunity to play that role a fair bit, and he excelled. So I personally think Suzuki will be that kind of center iceman for them. I'm not completely certain where Kotkaniemi fits longer term. I do think he's getting better all the time. But is he a number 1? Is he a number 2? Is he a number 3? I'm not completely certain where his long-term projection really fits. So if you had the opportunity to add a guy like Dubois and you have that much center depth that are all younger like that, that's not a bad problem to have by any means. Like I said, Danault, I really wouldn't want to see him leave. He's a great player for Montreal. But if you could turn that expiring contract that you are at risk to lose anyway into a guy like Dubois, that part of the deal definitely makes sense for Montreal. You're going to have to include a top prospect, whether it's Caufield or somebody else. The one prospect I think is certainly off limits for sure would be Romanov. He's going to get into the Habs lineup this year, likely have a bit of an impact, and we'll see where things go. But it might not even be the exact trade that we see. Montreal might even need to add an extra piece here, obviously, given the uncertainty over the Jackets' ability to re-sign Philip Danault as well. So if a deal happened sooner than later, that's still a pretty good return in my opinion. You get a bit of an older centerman and a guy like Danault, but somebody who they could affordably re-sign, who could play that higher up in the lineup center position that he's obviously been missing ever since he kind of got bumped down the lineup here with Montreal throughout the playoffs. And at the same time, you get Dubois the opportunity to play a solid top 6 role in his home province of Quebec for a team where he could excel as well. I mean, I know not to say that just because he's French that he should go to Montreal, but that franchise has been really looking and would love to have a top French-speaking Canadian superstar to be on that roster. It's something that's important to them, just like it's important to them for their coaches to be able to speak French and communicate bilingually with the fan base and the media. So, it's something that they value, and it's something that they haven't really had in some time, at least at an elite level. And Dubois has that potential. I mean, right now in his young career, he's a solid, probably 60-point player on an 82-game season. He was a point-per-game player in 10 games in the playoffs last year. Really showed that he can play not only offensively, but he can be responsible defensively as well, decent on faceoffs. Like, he really has a high ceiling, and he's still a few years away from hitting his prime. So there's not going to be any shortage of interest here. As I mentioned in other videos here in the past few days, like teams like the Jets, for example, the Senators, the Red Wings, anybody who are rebuilding would love to get their hands on this guy. He said, he would be a very attractive piece. So since it's been known that the Jackets received a trade request from him, I'm sure their phone is going to be ringing off the hook and having many conversations with Kekalainen. Now, of course, it's going to take a lot to pry him out of Columbus, and he may not pull the trigger for some time. As I mentioned in the last few days as well, I don't necessarily see a scenario where Dubois is necessarily traded, like I said, tomorrow, next week, maybe not next month, maybe even not this season. But as we approach the latter stages of this contract, or maybe even later in the season, depending on how things go, I can see a scenario, if the right deal comes along, that they do fulfill that trade request and make this move. So it's just a matter of where does he go and for what. So we may have other franchises that, obviously the media are going to be talking about this. And obviously it's just something just for discussions and to see what everybody thinks. So my question to you is, if you're the Montreal Canadiens and Marc Bergevin, do you pull the trigger if they're willing to accept a trade that would involve Danault and Caufield going to Columbus in exchange for Pierre Luc Dubois? Now, even if you had to include a third piece, maybe it's a second-round pick, maybe it's another prospect, would you do it at that point as well? Because it could take that much to pry this young centerman out of Columbus's hands. But there is a history of them playing hardball with RFAs, and many of them so far have left town not long after, in some cases after they were given a new contract. So it's just a situation that could very well happen yet again. So we'll see what happens in the case of Dubois. He very well could be in Columbus a little longer, but it's really uncertain at this point. We'll have to see how everything plays out. So let me know your thoughts on the trade proposal down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.